This is my Nanoxia Deep Silence 1, now home to a new GeForce RTX 3070 and an extra 100 watts of waste heat. In this video, I'll take you through the process of how I'm trying to improve my case cooling for free. Hopefully, this will let everything inside work a little better and give me more room to overclock. Why overclock a brand new graphics card? Well, turns out you just can't have enough performance. Ever. Step 1. Make the filters less minging. As you can see, the filters in my case are pretty damn dusty. I will remove, rinse, dry and replace. Messing about taking video also helps them dry out before I turn the PC on. Obviously don't run your computer with wet filters. Next, look at what we're working with. Say hello to my PC case. It's a nicely engineered Nanoxia Deep Silence 1 that I've had for a number of years now. What do we have to work with before making any changes? Well, we can open the chimney on top, and that's probably worth a few gigahertz, right? Okay, so how will we measure success here? Well, I'm going to use a few tools, and I'll link them in the description. First off, I'm using PowerMax, which heat soaks the system before the benchmark runs. This maxes out the CPU and GPU to give worst case temperatures, worse than you're likely to get in a real game. I'm then running the superposition benchmark to both give a score for something representative of a game, and also to see how the temperatures change during the benchmark run. It's a nice test of how the previous heat clears, since the benchmark's actually less intensive than PowerMax was. And finally, to get some temperature numbers, I've been using SpeedFan and HWInfo64. SpeedFan gives you some nice quick graphs, and HWInfo will let you log a very wide range of system parameters during the run. To get a baseline before the changes, I ran through my stress test and benchmark, and we can see that the CPU maxed out at 59C, GPU at 62, and the system sensor on the motherboard came in at 47. Hello to step number 2, which is what can we change? Well, first off, the power supply currently draws air in via a vent on the bottom of the case, and then shoots it out the back. It's occurred to me I can flip it over to draw hot air out of the case, and this would explain why there's so many extra holes for screws around that area in the rear casing. It's worth a quick note here to think about how we want the airflow. The original ATX spec expected air to enter at the bottom front of the case, travel diagonally over the drives, the motherboard and the CPU, and exit via the power supply at the top rear. Now, cases these days don't stick to that very often, and in here we have the PSU at the bottom. But we can still think about the airflow being front to back and using the power supply to exhaust some of the case air. It's also worth considering whether you'll end up with positive or negative pressure. You'll have seen cases with negative pressure. They're the ones with tufts of dust sticking out from every crevice, the shut lines, the buttons, the optical drive trays. It's pretty nasty. So for that reason, you'll generally want positive pressure, which is basically more fans in than out. I'm at 2 large fans in, and at the end of this clip, 1 PSU and 2 other fans out. So let's see how that ends up. This case does have space for another intake fan on the side panel, but I'm not sure I want to open a hole in this thing and ruin the sound deadening. So once I got the power supply flipped around, I could also take a look at the space under the chimney where fans can live. I had a spare 120mm fan lying around, so I put that in there to help get hot air out of the case. Although it's under the chimney, the plastic on top of the case actually has a cutout right at the back, so it should exhaust whether the chimney's open or closed. Sadly, the fan didn't have a connector on. I probably harvested it from some dead piece of electronics, So pretend you didn't see the stuff the wires in the Molex connector method, which you should never do at home. Although that being said, the Molex connector can give you a choice of 5, 7 or 12 volts depending on how you wire your fan, so there's some options there for ghetto fan speed control. And if you're feeling really brave, or more likely stupid, you can get 17 volts across a fan by using a -5 volt rail as the neutral. Now this leads to very whirry and one might say overclocked fans, but I did also accidentally blow up a hard disk doing this with a wiring mistake once, so it really isn't worth it. Okay, post-mod, where are we at? With the new fan arrangement, I now get 55C on the CPU, 61 on the GPU, and 44 for the system temp. If I open the vent, basically the same, and the benchmark scores have also remained the same. What have we learnt? The system and CPU temps have dropped a few degrees, the GPU's barely changed, and performance is identical. This is to be expected. The GPU has a good cooler, and I set an aggressive fan curve, so we were nowhere near the point it couldn't maintain a fixed temperature. I dug through the logs and found the GPU fan speeds, and the mods chopped them from about 2680 RPM to 2340. It's a heftier difference than I would have guessed. What I also noticed is that system reading's a pretty high number. I'm not sure exactly what this measures, but I now think it's the chipset or something else producing heat, and doesn't really represent the temperature of the air in the case very well. So I checked through the rest of the logs and found the temperature recorded for my SSD. That dropped from 42 pre-mod to 38 afterward. So again, about a 3 to 4 degree drop in the temperatures like many of the others. What am I going to conclude from this? Well, have the mods made my PC into a fire-breathing monster on the cheap? Not even slightly. Will they let me get more out of my overclocks? Almost certainly. The 340 RPM drop on the GPU fans is looking good. So in my next video, I'll overclock, stress test and benchmark both the CPU and GPU, and let's see how much extra performance we can wring out of this thing for free.